Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. We have a special guest for you here today. We have Lexi Martoia. She is a registered dietitian. She has her master's degree in clinical nutrition with an expertise in working with collegiate and professional level athletes. And she's served as the head sports dietitian at Oakland University, where she oversaw 18 different sports teams and worked with University of Illinois football program, Grand Rapids Gold NBA G League team, as well as the Michigan State football and hockey programs. So it's safe to say she's very versed in team sports, and we are very lucky to say that she is also part of the Nutritional Revolution practitioner team. Woohoo! Yeah, so we're very excited to have Lexi on board. You guys are going to learn all about her today, her tips, things she's learned from athletes, common things she's seen. So stay tuned. And of course, we're going to start with two truths and a lie, but Lexi, I'll let you say hi before we dive into it. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm happy to be a part of the team. And so I'm excited to let people know a little bit more about myself and who I am. So not a stranger.
Yes. Yeah. So before we go down the rabbit hole of what drove you to get excited about nutrition and sports nutrition, let's go ahead and do two truths and a lie. So go ahead and break them down for me.
Okay. My first one is I am left-handed like my dad.
Okay.
I was born in North Carolina.
Okay.
And I drink 2 cups of coffee every morning.
Oh, okay. I feel like the coffee is legit. And I haven't seen you write, but I'm going to say maybe the lie is you're not left-handed like your dad, but don't tell me the answer. We'll reveal it to the listeners at the end. Okay. So at the end, we'll find out if she was born in North Carolina, if she loves her 2 cups of coffee in the morning, or if she's left-handed. And before we learn all that stuff, how did you get into nutrition? What got you excited about it? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so I feel like I was interested in nutrition at a pretty young age. My mom was a nurse or is a nurse, and so she was always very into kind of like the nutrition aspect of medicine and like the holistic practice. And so I was very much around, her teachings, and obviously she bought organic things, and I was like, come on, can't we have the Rice Krispies in the house? And she was like, no, we're going to have the organic fruit leathers. So I just kind of grew up on, healthier diets, I would say. And, looking back, I'm thankful for it. But in the moment, I was kind of like, come on. But yeah, so, but when I was, I was pretty athletic growing up. I danced when I was younger. I tried a couple of different sports. I tried to play basketball for a little bit, didn't work out. So then I tried softball, and that one actually stuck. So, when I was in middle school, I was playing softball a lot, and kind of end of middle school, beginning of high school, I remember I was gaining like a lot of weight, and I found myself just being really like fatigued and tired all the time. And I was super moody. And, obviously women, like, we can be a little bit moody here and there, but I felt like, something was off. Like I just didn't feel like myself. And so I ended up getting diagnosed with hypothyroidism and PCOS. So that kind of opened my eyes to like, okay, what is this? Like, let me learn a little bit about this. And so, at 14, 15, I'm like doing all this research, and, my mom really tried to help me, because she knew that, it's like being insecure woman, like, especially in middle school, it's like, we're vulnerable. We want to like, be in shape and just be healthy. And I wanted to get back to like my normal self. So, throughout the years, it was just kind of like a trial and error of like trying different diets. Like, I was always, again, active still. So I was always at the gym. And if I wasn't, like practicing for my sport again, like just very active. And so it took me quite a long time to kind of get to the place where I am. now feeling like my hormones are pretty stable, things are going well. But it took, you know, up until now, I'm
Mhm.
26, that started at age 14, 15. So,
Wow.
my story of like trying to get healthy and like figure out what's going to work with me and like my body, my lifestyle. And they also did like I don't know if it was like a metabolism test or what it was, but when I was 16, they did this test that said like I had a metabolism of like a 35-year-old. And I was like,
Huh.
what?
Yeah, what test is this? I'm
I don't know
curious.
how accurate that is either, but yeah, all of these
Huh.
things piqued my interest. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, fast forward, I went to school at Michigan State, got my bachelor's there, and then went to Grand Valley for my master's. And so I was always looking for ways to kind of get myself involved in the sports realm because it's always very interesting to me. And I was an athlete, not in college, but before that. And then I had a lot of friends who did play sports in college, so it's just around it a lot. Um, and that's when I was able to work with Michigan State football team, and I really fell in love with, working with the athletes there. And it was just kind of my foot in the door. Was able to attend a lot of conferences and things like that. Just helped me learn and understand a little bit of a different side of like not the holistic clinical. Like there's such a different world of sports nutrition out there, and so
Yeah.
was learning a lot kind of within my schooling and like just outside of school, like being involved in a lot. I put a lot of like volunteer hours in just to kind of get the experiences that I have. So yeah, that led me into, an opportunity to work with Illinois football for a little bit. I worked during their football camp. That was insane. It was crazy hours and goodness gracious. And then again, yeah, I was able to, just network, opened up another door to the Grand Rapids Gold G League team, who's affiliated with the Denver Nuggets, who just won championship. So,
Nice.
and yeah, then that again, one thing led to another, and through different networking opportunities and people that I've met, I was able to, start working at Oakland University and take that head sports dietitian role. And that was a super, super fun experience for me just because I felt like I was over so many different teams that I had like the autonomy to really, see a lot and like work with a lot of different types of athletes and do a lot of different types of, testing and stuff. So that definitely broadened my perspective outside of just like working with football and basketball. I never worked with swimmers before or like tennis players. So it really, just kind of opened my eyes to the different needs of different athletes. And, not everybody is the same when it comes
Yes.
to nutrition.
Yeah. And all the different training schedules and volume and probably times a year and goodness, all the stuff. That's how many athletes was that, do you think?
So we didn't have a football team. So obviously most D1 universities do have football teams. So that cuts it down by like 100 athletes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but we were around, I think, like 300 to 350. But yeah,
Wow.
again, most universities with football teams, like most football teams have like 100, 120 athletes. So.
Yeah. Goodness. Do you have kind of like a sport you're more passionate about working with?
Not particularly. I really enjoy working with men and women of like different sports. And,
Mhm.
I feel like with each athlete that I have been able to interact with and, work with, I feel like I've learned so much from each sport and like athlete individually that, for me, it's, there's not like a particular type. It's just that I want to be able to educate all athletes, people who maybe even don't necessarily consider themselves athletes, but, are very active and wanting to live a healthy lifestyle. Like there's such a need for education in that group of people. And, a lot of us are with social media being so prevalent and all these, resources to healthier lifestyles. I feel like a lot of people are a lot more active now, but they still don't know how to like categorize themselves. They don't, consider themselves an athlete, but like, they're not sedentary either. So it's like,
Right.
where do those people fall into? And like, I want to be able to educate those people too, that like, you need more, you're probably under fueling, like you need
Yeah.
more food. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It is such a dilemma. I've had plenty of situations where people have called me to almost like check and see if they can work with me because they don't identify as athletes, but then they tell me what they're doing and they're, I don't know, doing like CrossFit 3 times a week and riding their Peloton and then going on a big hike on the weekend. And like, yeah, they're moving a lot more, I think, than a lot of people, or maybe they even realize too. And so there's a need to support those efforts and recover from things like that so you can keep yourself healthy in all ways. With that experience working with all those different types of sports teams, was there a common either like complaint or challenge that you noticed the athletes either struggling with or asking about?
I mean, when you're working with so many, like so much variety, I feel like you see certain things, common in certain sports.
Mhm.
One of the things that I felt like was very common was, I mean, across the board, I think underfueling is
Mm.
just generally like an issue within sports. And there's
Yeah.
not a lot of athletes I feel like don't eat over. They don't eat over. It's
Mhm.
they're not getting enough calories in because they really don't realize that they need like over 2,000 calories, sometimes 3 to 4,000 calories a day, like
Mm.
depending on their goals. And that's really hard to meet, if you're not supplementing or, like putting the time in to prepare food and snacks. And, especially as athletes, when they have such a busy schedule of like, okay, we're going to class, they have so many classes every day. And then they have not just one practice, but they also have a lift during the day that like that's scheduled for them. And so
Mm.
when they have a certain number of hours and they're like doing community service, like their schedules are so packed that it's, if you're not, packing ahead or planning ahead, that it's really hard to meet your calorie needs or get your protein, needs. And so I think the biggest thing was like really allowing, trying to get my athletes educated and like, okay, we need to prepare a little bit more, but also like, what can we do as a university to like support these athletes? Like how can we, make our fueling station better for these athletes who like don't have the resources to buy protein powder, and, like having that available for them to, take after lifts so they can be successful, and like giving them the resources to be
Yeah.
successful. So I feel like there's a lot of education and, again, a lot of times I feel like when I was working with like my freshmen versus like my juniors or seniors, not saying that the juniors or seniors like always have it figured out, but they have like more experience. Whereas like a lot of times you're talking to a freshman who's never lived, on their own before, and like their parents have, prepared their food a lot. And so it's like a huge transition for them. So I feel like it's, like more guiding and more reminding like them, like you need to invest like time into like this to be successful in the next 3 years and like prevent injury, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point. With the nutrition intake, did you by any chance notice like of the 3 macronutrients, was there one that was primarily low across the board in most athletes, or was it pretty even between all three?
I feel like the biggest thing, they knew I would always preach protein and carbohydrates on them. And so I think they were very aware of like, okay, Lexi wants me to get protein after my training sessions. Like, don't waste your training session. But, I feel like carbohydrates were one of those things where, they did good on, meet days or training days, competition days. But, on those days where they're, just going to class and practicing, like they weren't, refueling their bodies properly. It was like all the emphasis was on competition day and not like in the daily mundane like routine. So it's really kind of also emphasizing that. And I think also sometimes athletes are scared of fat because, again, like we preach like simple carbs around training. And so like they're scared to like have a little bit too much because when they like do associate it sometimes with weight gain, but also just like GI discomfort, like that's not going to be good for me, like around my training times. So I think sometimes there needs to be a little bit more education kind of within like the healthy fat realm, just so they understand. And so that's why I feel like, a lot of my athletes, I would, supplement them with fish oil or something like that if they didn't like
Nice.
fish, because that was always something that I feel like they were not getting enough of.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's smart. And with kind of working with the athletes, was there anything in particular, like a success story you remember or experienced, helping someone deal with a nutrition challenge or a recovery issue?
I feel like there's quite a few of my athletes where I was able to kind of see them, improve throughout the season. I have a couple stories where like we tried a lot of different things, and maybe the first thing didn't work. Like one of my athletes who was diagnosed with female athlete triad, had all of these deficiencies going on and low energy, and she also had insomnia, and it was affecting like her hormones and all of these things. And so I remember just really trying so many things with her, and like something wouldn't work. And so then we try something else. And I really would just emphasize for him, like, this is like a trial and error process. We're not always going to get it right on the first try. A lot of times we need to like figure out what actually works, and like trial things on our practice days to see if that's going to work on like competition days. And I think nutrition, it's a constant changing field, but especially with like our lifestyles, like needs are different every day. And I think with her it was just kind of like a trial and error sort of process. And eventually there were things that did end up working and did end up sticking. And so it was just kind of like staying true to like, okay, we are gonna find a solution, like we're gonna work together. And like she didn't give up hope, but I didn't give up hope on her. And it was just kind of like, let's try something until like we find the solution.
Awesome.
But yeah, and then I had another athlete where she had a lot of pain from either arthritis or some of these things where you don't always think about athletes dealing with some of these things that they can't control. And so with her it was just a lot of education on those healthy fats and collagen, and like she was so willing to put in the work and so motivated that the things that we did try, she was so like habitual with it that like it actually did improve her symptoms. And it's a lot of times not necessarily me doing it, it's them being like disciplined and like doing it day by day, not just like I feel like that's the biggest thing, is just like having that consistency. So
yeah, it's you're able to provide the knowledge and education, and then they have to do the homework, which I think a lot of people don't realize or comprehend. Initially they think that we just do it all for them, but they have to take some action on their end, right? That's great. With the female athlete triad, did she lose her cycle and get her cycle back, or was there like bone density?
A little bit of both. And we were working towards her cycle, so she was starting to have more symptoms of like her period as we're continuing to increase the energy intake. And she did actually get a cycle, but it was one of those things where it took like 6 or 7 months of like really like working with different things and like supplementing a lot of different things here and there, and like really reiterating things. And sometimes I feel like some of my appointments with my athletes are just like we're just talking, and like we're talking about what we talked about last week, but it's like it needs to be talked about again, because like they need to remember that things we talked about were very important.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Moving on to like a whole new topic or habit is every session is challenging, and it's like you haven't checked off the first list, like item on the list kind of thing. That's great. And so thinking about kind of maybe team sport athletes, heading into summer, things are getting a little bit warmer. Do you have any tips for summer athletes where their sports are outside?
Yeah. Well, I talked about this a little bit in my webinar that I just did recently. But hydration is so key. And I think I never leave the house without a water bottle. And so I think that's one of the easiest ways to just make sure we're staying more hydrated is, like sometimes that water bottle is like that boredom thing. So if you're at work or like in class, like just being able to like reach for your water, you're kind of already staying on top of that. And another thing I would just say is like preparing a little bit, like packing snacks. Like if you know you're going to be gone for a couple hours, a little bit, anything more than 3 hours, and you need to eat kind of within that time frame, like pack a snack or make sure you have a plan to stop somewhere, to eat, so you can, not go too long without, replenishing the nutrients our body needs. And then again, something that I already mentioned is just trial and error. Like sometimes the first thing that you try doesn't work. Sometimes it goes completely sideways and you have a terrible experience, but that's the beauty of, trying to find what's right for you. Everybody's so individualized that like the same thing that works for Joe Schmo isn't going to work for, James. I don't know.
Yeah. Perfect. And the webinar Lexi did, that was a free webinar. So we can link that in the show notes for the listeners if you guys want to check that out. She went over, I think it was like 7 different tips for supporting recovery and performance. So definitely check that out. I think it was 30-minute webinar. So if you guys got some time, check it out. It's on our YouTube channel. We'll link it below. Okay. And then one final question for you. How should people be fueling? And I guess when I say people, we should be talking about, maybe we'll say like a team sport. And what are some things that you can do as a sports nutrition practitioner to help them with their fueling?
Yeah. So as far as fueling goes, different day by day. And that's why it's so important to work with a sports dietitian. So, when you have someone working with you to figure out what your energy needs are going to be, a sports dietitian will help give you the resources to, break down what foods we need at what time, what's going to be best for our training sessions. And we use quite a few different softwares to where we've created some of these protocols to help you, break things down very easily. These evidence-based researches that, we've, created protocols and things for, and we utilize those to be able to help you and give you the tools that you need to be the most successful athlete. So, also working with a sports dietitian, if you were working one-on-one with me, you would be able to get some meal plans set out for you so you knew exactly what we're supposed to be eating in a day. We'd go through sweat training and gut training to figure out how much electrolytes we need to be replenishing. So there's a lot of individualized things that working with a sports dietitian can really impact you, and really trying to get the most out of your sport and most out of your everyday routines. Yeah.
Awesome. So you shouldn't eat the same breakfast and lunch and dinner every single day of the week when you do different amounts of training.
I mean, hey, some people like that, but
Yeah.
as humans who have a lot of different nutrient needs, it's nice to, rotate some of those things so we can make sure we're getting a lot of different micronutrients and those vitamins and minerals that, especially as athletes who need a little bit more than your average person, it's important to, get some different types of varieties of those vitamins, minerals, and macronutrients.
Yes. Yeah. I hear that. I remember working with it's happened plenty of times, but I've seen plenty of clients just eat the exact same breakfast portions, like before a 45-minute workout and before a 4-hour bike ride. It's like, there should be some different portions going on there, or different food items to support those different efforts. So I think that's been a big eye opener for a lot of the clients I've seen. And it is, the sports nutrition stuff is really helpful to help. Like if you think about team sports too, strength lifting day versus maybe it's like a game day or practice, scrimmage, those efforts are all going to be so different. So it is helpful to make sure you're fueling and recovering from those things appropriately from a food, but also a hydration perspective. All right.
I had one of my athletes, he said, this is like totally what works for me, because we were trying to get him to eat more carbohydrates on competition days. And he would just take a box of Honey Nut Cheerios and he would just bring it to the meets with him. And so he'd just be walking around or like doing the training sessions, and he has like a
nibbling away.
A whole cereal box of Cheerios that he would eat because it didn't upset his stomach, but it was just, I'm like, hey, whatever works for you.
Quick carbs. Yeah. That's awesome. I love hearing all the different things that like athletes have tested in sport and that really work for them. And you hear about all these interesting, neat ideas. So yeah, I think it's great. Okay. So we'll circle back and let people know your 2 truths and a lie. So you had said you're left-handed like your dad, born in North Carolina, and you drink 2 cups of coffee every morning. I'm thinking you're not left-handed. What was the lie?
That's correct.
Woohoo! Oh my goodness. And just to be clear, listeners, I've never seen Lexi write anything by hand because we always meet via Zoom. So yeah. Awesome. All right. I got that one right. So you like your coffee in the morning and you were born in North Carolina. And then let's see, where can our listeners find you, follow you, all that stuff?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is LILMAART. That's my personal. And then I post a lot of like cooking and food, like little demos on the Instagram, Nutrient Work, and I will spell that. It's Nutrient and WRK. You can also book with me on the Nutrition Revolution website, and you can also find me on LinkedIn at Lexi Martoia, last name Martoia.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your sports nutrition journey with us, Lexi. This has been super helpful. And I'm sure the listeners enjoyed some nuggets of wisdom there. And thank you again for your time today.
Thanks for having me.